Disclaimer. Any of the guidance offered by the podcast host, myself, or the podcast guests is our own guidance. We are not liable for any of the actions the podcast listener decides to do. Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast with me, Johnny Pardo. And today I welcome Tom Vorselen to the show. And I'm excited to hear about what he's doing in the study coach and helping people in the world. So just a quick introduction to Tom. So Tom is the founder of the Study Coach, where he helps overwhelmed students and busy professionals beat procrastination, master science-backed learning methods, and succeed academically without burning out. After going from near failure in his bachelor's program to earning a master's degree by learning how to learn, Tom now supports students through one-to-one coaching, workshops, and his AI-powered platform, helping over 175 learners achieve top grades while building a global community of over 1,000 followers. Welcome to the show today, Tom. Glad to have you on.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Johnny. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm loving hearing what you're doing and really fascinated to go into your story. I know many people have told me about their struggles learning. I've had times in my life where I really struggled and kind of turned it around as well. So yeah, I first of all would just love to know a little bit about that transition from, as I described there in your bio, that you felt like you were sort of like failing in your bachelor's program to then getting a master's, which is awesome. How did you start to like uncover the steps? How did you start changing things around?
Yeah, great question to start with. Before I do that, I actually want to acknowledge the work that you've been putting in, because it's amazing to host a podcast like that. So I also want to encourage the people who are listening, if they've been listening to your work and they like the guests that you put on, like leave a 5-star rating and a review on the platform that they're listening to. So just wanted to have that out there, because you deserve that based on all of the hard work that you're doing. So yeah, to give a bit of a background and indeed what was that transition. As you mentioned, my name is Tom Vorselen, founder of the Study Coach, and many students, but probably your listeners are maybe more working professionals or adult learners. A lot of them struggle, with procrastination, weak study habits, and constantly feeling overwhelmed, and they end up feeling stuck, especially when it comes to learning. And my goal is indeed to help these students and adult learners with science-backed learning time management methods, but also improving their mindset, which is a popular topic on your podcast too. And I will share a bit of my story in a second, but just to make sure that the person who is listening thinks like, there's actually something for me to get out of this pod. So you want to listen to the end. Yes, we've coached hundreds of people. You mentioned 175. Right now, we're already sitting at 220, which shows the amount of demand that there is for getting help in this field. Yeah, because I started doing this because I was a very terrible student. And they think that I'm always a naturally smart, gifted kid, which was absolutely not the case. High school, I went into my finals with 3 failing grades. So I had to compensate to ensure that I would actually pass my finals and then go into my bachelor's. With some cramming and last minute work, I managed to do that. But in my bachelor, it just absolutely whacked me. The amount of material was so overwhelming. I was feeling so stressed. And I failed indeed 6 exams back to back. And I came home to my parents and I had to share the news that I failed another exam. And my parents were also devastated. They're like, oh, we see that you're putting in the work. It's not that I wasn't doing anything. I really was trying and putting in hours. And they said, Tom, we found something that is called a learning professor or a learning coach. Are you open for that? And I was like, I'm open to anything, whatever will help me overcome this challenge, right? So my parents saw this and they invited this professor to our place. And he gave us a workshop about scientifically proven learning methods. And my parents were fascinated too. They were like, we've never learned this in school and nobody ever taught us this. And I started to implement what he has taught us. And I started to pass literally every single exam. I was like, sweet. So there's actually a strategy or a method behind the learning. And my confidence started to grow. And I felt like I could take on everything academically wise because I knew how to learn. And that's how I kept on taking on additional challenges. Indeed, a master's program at one of the best private business university at the Netherlands, where I got in via a scholarship because of my good academic performance in the final years of my bachelor's and stuff. So it was a complete like 360 change, of course, over the years. But yeah, if people are listening, don't think that I was the gifted, intelligent, straight A kid from high school. I literally had to turn it around with a lot of effort and indeed definitely better methods.
And what was that's awesome. And what was the difference? There's maybe a few things, but was there like anything notable from when you were like struggling before to kind of take it in to the new way of your learning?
Yeah, so what most people do wrong is that they indeed use passive methods of learning. So I'm going to give a couple of examples such that the listener can potentially resonate and think, oh yeah, I might do this. And then let's also indeed educate them such that, we can switch this. One of the most famous passive learning methods is rereading your material. So you look at a piece of text and you read it again and again and again. What this is going to create is the illusion of knowing. Your brain just simply recognizes material. And then you think, yeah, I've seen this before, so I know this. You come on the exam, blank mind, and you completely bomb it. Second most common mistake is highlighting stuff. All sounds like feels really productive. Yeah, feels really productive. Textbooks look like colorful rainbows. But in terms of learning and retention, absolute garbage. But still, people use it as their go-to learning method in between brackets. And the third thing is indeed rewriting the notes. So literally looking at a textbook and then writing the summary on a piece of paper after just like copy pasting the text. It's just as if you are a human copy machine. And all of these things are quite passive. What do I mean with that? There is little engagement and little active recall of material. And that is the shift that we recommend most people to make. So if you notice yourself doing the rereading, the highlighting, or the copy pasting notes, I want you to stop doing that and start to maybe read a text for like 5 sentences, maybe close the book and try to recall from your memory what you have read and then speak it out loud or write it down on a piece of paper in your own words, not copy pasting, in your own words. Like science back to back found that active recall, retrieving information significantly improves knowledge retention already in the short term. So if you want a quick win, try this out and you should be seeing some cool improvements already.
I was laughing at some of those ways when I was just thinking back to the school days of looking at a page again and again and like it's not going in, or like highlighting everything. So you got rainbows, like you said, colourful rainbows. What about, sometimes I've heard this phrase like when you teach, you learn. Is that one of the active methods at all that you've come across?
Yeah, what you're referring to is actually called Feynman technique. It's named after Richard Feynman, one of the most famous physicists. Like can't be bothered about that. Please help me out if I butchered that word sure there, because it's not my first English, not my first language. And basically what he said is, if you're indeed able to teach material, you truly understand it. And the method that you're referring to basically means picking a topic, explaining it in simple words, then identifying your knowledge gaps, because you'll probably notice that you get stuck somewhere, and that's completely fine. And then you're going to restudy that specific knowledge gap, like where you're getting stuck. And with this loop, you're indeed actively recalling information, you're simplifying it so you improve your understanding, and that helps in cementing the knowledge long term, but also indeed building upon your existing knowledge because you identify those knowledge gaps.
Got you. Oh, okay. That's interesting what it's called. What about, and do you feel like, Tom, from what you've studied on Learn, that can passive meditation work for, not meditation, passive learning work for some people? Or are we all different, or is active generally better for everyone?
Yes. Short answer, yes. Of course, you have to consume material to, eventually learn it, right? It's not that you study something about chemistry and you just know it. Like there has to be some kind of consumption, where it's reading a text, watching a video, going to a lecture, indeed doing maybe some kind of like experiment. But indeed, that is a kind of like one-off thing. Like after that first exposure with the material, you do want to get into that active retrieval, explaining the things, making practice problems, just to continuously see where you're missing knowledge and what you can build upon on top of it. Yeah.
I was just curious because some people, I'm fascinated by this. There's some people who, like, I remember at school, were just like so clever and just anything they absorbed kind of like stuck. But would they be even better with active learning as well?
Probably, yes. Or maybe you didn't know that they were doing that unconsciously. So some people indeed, like for example, now when I'm learning, I listen to a podcast, for example, and I pause it after 5 minutes and I just think, oh, what did they discuss? Or how would I explain this in my own words? Or what was the research that they discussed that I might find interesting to share with my audience or with my students, such that I'm, doing this more often in between. And maybe without you knowing it, because you can't see what's going on between those ears, is that these students who looked more clever were in their mind retrieving like, oh, how can I connect this information to something I already know? Or what is the answer on this question? And they were doing that by themselves more often, where you were the consumer and sitting back and like rereading the notes and highlighting the stuff.
Got you. Yeah, it's like, yeah, there's not just learning, but some people have got this like unconsciously doing something right sometimes, Sometimes people do really well money and unconsciously they're doing something right, and then other people not so much and unconsciously doing something wrong. So that would going to like learning, that would make a lot of sense for me when you say it like that.
Yeah.
Love that. People come to you. We just talked about, I was kind of, my mind was going to school, but I can definitely see how this relates, obviously, to adults like we're talking to mainly here on the podcast. So the people who come to you, what kind of like challenges are they facing in their day-to-day life with sort of learning?
Yeah, I think the best is to just share a story or an example of people that we've worked with, because I think that gives a clear picture. And I think the person that I would like to highlight in this story is my Reed. And my Reed was an entrepreneur who has an accountancy business with 50 employees located in Ireland. And she wanted to add a additional service to her business, which was law related. And therefore, she became the first accountancy company in Ireland who had both the accountancy part and as well this specific type of law. So she became quite unique and could improve her value proposition there. The only thing was she was scared to death to take exams, and she was procrastinating on learning for this law specific course, and she was just avoiding it and feeling super afraid, and she didn't know what to do. So she reached out to me and she said, Tom, I know that you work with students, but can you help a 58-year-old lady who has her own business and is willing to do a law exam? Please note, this lady also had 3 teenage kids and a dog, so quite busy person, entrepreneur, kids, dog, and law exam to prepare. And I said, yes, of course we can, because like we work with everything between age 18 and 61. And we figured out that indeed the biggest challenge for her was the procrastination and being scared, which all comes down indeed to a state of mind. Past experiences influence how she now looks at a certain situation, limiting beliefs. I can't do this. I'm bad at exam taking because of past failures. So that was the first thing that we had to work on. Just her own belief and figuring out what was actually holding her back. Once we overcame that, we started to look at her time management and her organizational skills, because she's a busy lady, so she had to create time to work on this exam. And the next thing was that we indeed looked at her learning strategies, because she had an exam to pass. She ended up in the top 10% of a global STEP reward, which meant she was one of the highest performers in the exam. So going from completely scared and not willing to take an exam to being in the top 10% and getting a global recognition. Yeah, I think that is a pretty cool story to share to, for your listeners to identify, oh, I am a working adult and I have a course or I have a certification that I get stuck on and I have the current belief that I'm unable to do it. Let this story be a sign that, well, it's definitely possible. if you have the right methods and strategy.
I guess I'm also thinking as well, like if you're going into a new business, whether it's starting your own or you're in a new job or new workplace or position, and there's loads of information being flown at you, maybe active learning could potentially really support you with that.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I still apply the majority of the things that I'm learning as a starting entrepreneur. Like my business is 3 years old now. I'm learning every day. Like I'm in a YouTube course where I learn better how to do YouTube. I am in public speaking courses. I am in sales and marketing training. And you all have to learn all of these concepts and these principles, and you have to learn how to lead a team, how to manage your team podcasts, and try to implement that. So it all comes down to learning, and it's the same for you, but the same for indeed a 30, 40, or 50-year-old who's changing a job or getting into a new field.
I like that, yeah. So when you're learning these things, like whether it's the YouTube, the sales or marketing, how do you find yourself like you learning? What technique do you do?
I personally use the teach technique. And why? Because I'm actually exposed to a lot of people who are experiencing a challenge. So the sooner that I can simplify it and teach it and make it easy for them to apply, the better I know whether I truly master the content. And if they ask me a question back and say, Tom, then how does this and this work? And I don't know the answer, I'm super honest. I say, hey, let me go research this and come back to you tomorrow. And that, like encourages me to study something or elaborate my knowledge on this specific topic and then help them move forward again.
I got you. That's cool. People coming to you, like, see on the podcast we talk, there's sometimes what comes up is like negative self-talk or sort of like challenges about our own belief. And I've totally been there when I've struggled to learn something or take something in. It's been very harsh, particularly when I was younger, and it's something I had to work through. Do you find that much with your students?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of negative past experiences that make people feel unconfident and self-doubt themselves a lot. Yeah, which is definitely a mindset. Challenges, negative thoughts lead to negative feelings, which lead to avoiding or sabotaging ourselves on actually doing the task, which creates more negative consequences, which reinforces the negative belief. And then you end up in this vicious cycle of avoidance, and that is never going to help them move forward and pass these exams, for example.
How have you found it's really helped them to sort of move through some of these negative beliefs or talk that they might be stuck in?
I think indeed what most people do is they indeed start with affirmations, and they say, I am a smart learner, or I am confident and I can do this. But I think that is just a little part of the equation, where if you're doing this, like there's like absolutely nothing wrong with it. I think we have to go back all the way to the root of the problem. So we have to identify what was the event. And not that I'm a psychologist or a therapist by any means, but we have to go back to the event that made you start to self-doubt. Or was there maybe a professor who literally told you when you were younger, like, are you stupid? Or you're not good enough in this yet? And this can go back to when you were 7, 8, or 9 or something like that, right? Like very, very long ago. So we have to go back there and then figure out why we have created that belief. And we usually do this in our workshops with journaling sessions. So I literally prompt and guide them to think about, hey, what is a past experience that made you feel unconfident when it comes to academics or learning? And when you now think back about this, how does that make you feel? And if you feel this way, is it easy to take action, or are you actually procrastinating and avoiding the task at hand? So we really want to make people aware of their behavior before we can actually start changing it. And then we indeed ask them, right, Johnny, now imagine that you follow our system, right? And you look at all of the results of the other students. Do you believe you can do it too? Because they've followed the same program. And then they're like, yeah. So, okay, if you say, I'm following a proven system. As long as I take action, I will succeed. How does that feel? And they say, okay, that feels actually pretty good, hopeful. And how much easier is it to take action when you feel good or hopeful? Yeah, like, okay, I'm going to, give it a shot. I'm going to try it. And then they slowly start shifting their belief and they start getting better results. People go literally from academic probation to A+ on every exam. And they're like, Tom, I'm a confident learner now. And it's like, cool. You just build more proof that you are indeed capable of doing something by shifting first your mindset, then your actions, and the results will follow.
Combination of a few things than just like the
Yeah.
affirmations, the surface level kind of thing. There's a lot of talk about people mention ADHD's talked about a lot in this day and age of, and I know our attention's short as well in a general thing, whether you're ADHD or not, like kind of, I feel like we're conditioned for it quite a lot with what goes on in the world. For someone who's maybe got a struggle with attention or even ADHD, how do you feel like active learning helps them?
So I think most important to address first is indeed what happens these days when it comes to indeed attention span and ADHD like symptoms, is that the internet these days is full with, if you have one of these symptoms, you might have ADHD. And a lot of people start to kind of like self-diagnose based on a social media post or a TikTok thing. And that is super dangerous because most likely your attention span has just been cooked by the short form content that you are consuming, and you're never really forcing yourself to indeed focus for an extended period of time. So if I hurt someone by saying this, like, not sorry, because I want you to be aware, you're right. And if you have diagnosed ADHD, then it's also interesting to figure out which type, because there's 7 different types and all of them have different approaches and different pros as well as different challenges. I don't like to call it cons, but challenges, okay? The reason why I say challenges rather than cons, in our program, the students who have diagnosed ADHD, who create better structure, apply the learning methods, they are often the best performing students in our program because they finally understand how to work with their brain instead of always working against it and saying, I'm easily distracted, or I can't organize, or I forget stuff. All right, let's figure out how to indeed create a system to tackle that. And then they implement it. It's amazing. 58-year-old lady, Delphine, shifted from working in consultancy for 30 years to doing nursing. And she said, Tom, I'm stressed, overwhelmed. She took anxiety medication and stuff like that. Worked together with her for 3 months. Top 10% of the program, never scored below 90% on any of her exams. Used her anxiety medication, and she said, wow, I wish I've done this 30 years ago, Yeah, I think it's important to understand indeed what is going on and how to deal with it, rather than saying, oh, I have ADHD, therefore I cannot. Then I think you're like giving away a lot of your power, and it's more like I have this kind of victim mentality. Of course, there's additional challenges, but it's not impossible to overcome and solve them.
I like that, not getting caught on a label and limiting yourself.
Exactly.
As well. Yeah. And yeah, it is. I agree with you. There is a lot of, I'm not saying it's not a real thing, but there's a lot of self-diagnosis I've certainly witnessed go on and things like that. So, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. For things like overwhelm, like in this day and age, we can get very overwhelmed with like how much there is to do, lack of time. Is that something you work through with your students?
Lack of time or lack of priorities?
Good question.
Yeah, that's the question. Because when people say I don't have time, it's either that you've never really looked at how much time you have on a day-to-day basis and where you spend it. Because people sometimes say, Tom, I don't have time. And I ask them one simple thing. Okay, open up your phone, go to settings, go to the screen time thing, and tell me what the number says there. And then they say 6 hours a day. And I'm like, okay, so you say that you don't have time, but you spend 6 hours on the phone? And then they're quiet, right? So like really look yourself in the mirror and think, is it really that I don't have time, or am I just wasting it without actually being aware of it? And the other question, what you said was, what was the other question?
It was around just like overwhelm, and I really like that perspective on time. Yeah, just about like someone who's challenged with overwhelm. There's like so much to do, and how do I deal with that? I've got to do this, and this.
Yeah, I think one of the quotes that stood out for me is you're not feeling stressed or overwhelmed because you do too many things. You feel stressed and overwhelmed because you lack structure and overview. And that is because usually overwhelm and stress is created by the brain because of uncertainty. So when there's uncertainty, your brain is going to come up with all of these possible solutions, and it's going to worry about a bunch of things, everything that can go wrong, that will probably not go wrong, but your brain creates these problems. So if you never really look indeed at where your time is going or how the assignment or the exam is organized that you're going to have at hand, your brain will just come up with a bunch of BS and make you feel stressed or overwhelmed. So indeed, what we teach our students is indeed simple time blocking principles, or indeed having them read through the syllabus at least before going into a course or an exam. 75% of people never read through that thing before they get into a program. So it's like these small, simple steps that help your brain be more certain, which takes away that possibility of going into that rabbit hole of worry. Yeah.
Good guidance there. Tom, I'd like to go a bit backwards, like sort of to the start of the conversation where you were, obviously you shared your turnaround and you had like your learning coach, which was awesome. Before you got to, I'm just curious, before you got to like a bachelor's degree, that level, was it something you always kind of had a battle with in school?
The learning.
Yeah, the learning.
Yeah. So I was a so-called young student. So I started primary school when I was 3, turning like 4. So I was always like a bit younger than the average kids in my classes, which especially in these young ages, like brain development goes really fast. And I was always kind of like a bit behind, but good enough to catch up. And especially then in high school, it became very clear. Like the first 4 or 5 months, I was getting really bad grades, and then mom and dad had to get the tutors, and I had to really, like sit down to do my homework and learn. But I was barely passing. And that was like my whole story, or like my 5-year high school journey. Of course, I had other things I preferred to do. Playing soccer was a huge thing for me in that moment. I loved playing video games way more than studying. So like that avoidance and procrastination was definitely there. But I always knew that I would, scrape by. But yeah, in a bachelor's program or in a university program, you just can't get away with that behavior anymore. And I learned that the hard way. Yeah.
Got you. Yeah, but and then you got to your learning coach, and then things shifted for you.
Yeah, insane. Like it was such a life change. And yeah, well, you shared it in the beginning in the introduction, but the fact that we have 500,000 followers on Instagram, almost 200,000 on Facebook, and quite recently we started posting seriously on TikTok and YouTube, and these have grown to 5,000 and 6,000 in like just a very short time span. That shows that how much how much demand there is for information like this, because apparently so many people struggle with this, right? So yeah, it's an absolute privilege to guide people in this challenge and make them have that shift similar to as what I have experienced.
Curious to hear your perspective on like kind of like schools and why this kind of isn't knowledge in schools of like how to learn.
So maybe there's teachers who are listening to this who say, Tom, you're wrong. We do teach that. I'm going to share it from the perspective of my current situation and the majority of the people that I work with. We spend around 13,000 hours at school between the age of 5 and 22. And on average, 0 hours are being dedicated to teach you how to learn, how to manage your time, or deal with the stress and the overwhelm. There's no such course as executive thinking skills or time management skills or learning method skills. Well, these are fundamental skills when you eventually get into work life or indeed, uni or other programs. These days, we do see that indeed more primary schools and high schools are paying attention to the topic, but a majority of the people, like everyone aged 24, 25 and above, have never had that knowledge. It wasn't included in their school program. So maybe, yeah, the kids right now get it, but there's this huge group of people who have absolutely no idea. And that's what I'm doing it for that group. And yeah, the school system, I think it's developing, it's getting better. But yeah, it surprises me that indeed in America, they did a research and they found that learning how to learn is not included in a teacher's education. And it's like, okay, so they are also only being educated to teach mathematics, but they're not necessarily educated on the learning science behind how to then teach the kids how to learn mathematics in the most efficient and effective way. If that makes sense. It becomes a bit complicated, but yeah, like I'm not here to change the whole education system. I'm just here to change a couple of lives, which is within my power.
I love that. So with active learning, I know you've got these different techniques and ways. Is it like some people find different techniques more beneficial than others? Is it important for them to find one that's the most fun for them? Is that something you help them with?
Yeah, so I think most people usually stick to only one learning method. And I think the one most famous active recalling method that probably everyone has heard of is flashcards. You know, it's like question on the front end, definition on the other hand, and that is some kind of active learning, but it's usually not sufficient enough to perform well on an exam, because these flashcards are very often rote memorization. So I hear a lot of students and adults like, oh yeah, I make these 300 flashcards and I flick through them, but I still fail the exams. And I'm like, yeah, that is because learning has different layers, and each layer has a different learning method associated with it. And you're just operating at level 1 while your exam tests you on level 3, 4, and 5. So we have to get you up there with these different learning methods. And across the board, in our program, we discuss around 9 different learning methods that are associated with these different layers. And we recommend the student or the adult learner to indeed start with the first layers to get familiar with the topic. Then we indeed move up to the application layer, where they have to indeed show that they can use the information or they can solve a problem with a certain formula. But the highest layers are evaluating and analytical thinking. And this is where you have to judge. This is where you have to compare. This is where you have to explain why this answer is correct based on the given information in the text. A flashcard doesn't ask you to do that. So yes, we do need them to move up the ladder of learning, and then we facilitate different learning strategies also with our AI-powered platform that you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more about the role in AI in learning, if it can use it to help people or not.
Yeah, I would recommend everyone to look at my most recent upload on YouTube. I shared a video how you indeed should be using AI to learn. In short, if you let AI do the thinking for you, you're not learning. So if you ask it to summarize, if you ask it to explain you something, that again, you're going to read this through. That is passive learning, right? If you leverage AI to ask you questions and direct your thinking, then you are learning. And these days, AI is pretty damn good at creating questions that are sometimes even more difficult than the exam questions that you're going to get. So let's prepare you in that way such that you feel super confident going into those exams.
Yeah. Just reading back the answer it gives you, I guess, again, that's quite passive. So rather than being tested and retrieving the information that way.
Exactly.
So Tom, I know you're doing a lot of amazing things for people to help them with their learning, get people over maybe barriers they're coming up in their learning, whether it's a student or it's like an adult we've been talking about. So as we sort of wrap up today, I'd love to know where the listener can find you to reach out, get hold of your resources and your services for any support they're looking for. And is there maybe a final point you'd like to leave us with today?
What do you want me to start with? The final point or the resources?
Let's go with the final point first.
All right, cool. I listened to one of the, I think, most famous self-development gurus in the world, Tony Robbins, the other week in a conversation with Stephen on Diary of a CEO. And Tony Robbins acknowledged that learning and pattern recognition is one of the most valuable skills that he has developed in his life. So if this man, who has huge impact on the world, shares that learning how to learn and recognizing patterns and analytical thinking and evaluating is one of the most important skills, then let that be a wake-up call that this should be something that you're taking seriously, because you'll be learning in every area of your life. And if you can do it more efficiently and effectively, you're going to see more progress. You're going to find learning a lot more enjoyable, and you're going to achieve, in my opinion, a lot more things because you now know how to learn, you can implement it, and you can make something cool out of that. So that is my final point.
Oh, amazing. I love that. Cool. And yeah, just the pattern recognition from Tony and how valuable learning really is. So yeah, Tom, I'd love to know again where the listener can find you and your resources.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for giving me that opportunity. And yeah, I've created something for your listeners that I've specially made for them. And it's also some of the things that I usually reserve for my paying clients. So what I'm going to give your listeners is a study breakthrough bundle, and it basically consists of two things. But before I share like what it exactly is, I want to be very clear who this is for. So if you're indeed a working professional who's constantly dealing with procrastination, feeling overwhelmed or experiencing time pressure, and if you want to study efficiently, stay more consistent and actually remember what you've learned, then this is for you. And maybe right now you feel like you're working really hard but not seeing the results like we discussed earlier. So you start to doubt yourself, your confidence is taking a hit. So I want to share with you proven science-backed methods to manage time, focus and retain information. So the first thing that I'm giving them is a PACER study blueprint. And this is a step-by-step framework that you can use to remember everything that you've learned by using active recall, the principle that we discussed today, and other memorization strategies, which will help them feel more in control and more confident. And the second thing that I'm giving away is the part that I usually only reserve for paying clients. It's the Anti-Procrastination Masterclass series. And this is a video training and a workbook specifically designed to help stop procrastination, plan your week better, and build better consistency. Ultimately, eliminate procrastination, learn more efficiently and effectively without burning out with science-backed methods. I made a specific URL, which you can also share in the show notes, but I will share it here as well. It's Tom Vorselen, that's TomVorselen.com/confidence, referring to your podcast. So once again, if they want the PACER study blueprint and the anti-procrastination masterclass series, they go to tomvorselen.com/confidence.
Amazing, Tom. Very, very generous and grateful for you giving us access to that. We appreciate it. And yeah, I know procrastination is something that is a lot of people challenge with. So thank you for giving that and everything you're doing. Thank you for all the valuable insight you've given us today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Johnny.
Absolutely. So that concludes our episode for today. And remember to lead with your heart and not with fear.